Zoom so they can tune in on YouTube. And every now and then I'll get turned on.
Maybe there's just so many. I'm sorry, go ahead.
In the moment, nobody's on Zoom. It's usually Joe and Kim. I don't see Heather. She said she was going to leave you while they were gone. All right. In Matthew 12, the disciples had picked the heads off the grain, which was perfectly lawful for them to do. But the Pharisees that saw him said, You're not doing what you should do on the Sabbath. They're doing what's against the law to do on the Sabbath. He then offers some other things. He says, a lot of this stuff you've taken too far. There was, in the tabernacle, not the temple this time, but David, and it says, but he said to them, verse 3, have you not read what David did when he became hungry, he and his companions, how he entered the house of God, and they ate the consecrated bread, which is not lawful for him to eat, nor for those with him, but for the priests alone. That is entirely true. David did go during the Civil War, when Saul was after him, he went to the tabernacle and he ate the showbread, the consecrated bread that was supposed to be in front of the Holy of Holies. But he ate it, he and his men there, which leads me to believe there must have been more than I ever thought. Showbread there, that was there. Maybe there's a whole bunch that they made ahead of time. I don't know.
Mine says 12 loaves, and they were changed each Friday, or not the Sabbath.
Okay, so it's 12 loaves of bread.
And I don't know how big that would be.
Well, honestly, as far as David's army, there were times when he wasn't that big either.
No,
Yeah.
When he went in those caves, a lot of times.
Yeah, and he had small armies that sort of, it was almost like terrorist cells, that he had little cells all around. If he was on the run, he and his men,
Guerrilla
So 12 may have been plenty, at least temporarily. And then he says, you said we do no work on the Sabbath, but the priests violate it up all the time under your definition. With your definition of what the work is, David's a sinner, and so is all the priests in the temple, because they work all day on the Sabbath. And yet are innocent. But I say to you, something greater than the temple is here. But if you had known what this means, I desire compassion rather than sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent. And then verse 8, which should actually go with verse 7, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. So, David was a sinner under your definition of sinning, and so are all the priests every Sabbath, because they work all on the Sabbath. But if you'd understood what it means, I desire compassion rather than sacrifice, you wouldn't have condemned them. Now, what does this mean? Does this mean the Word of God isn't supposed to go where it's supposed to go? No. But what it does mean is that you took a command of God, you took it out of context, and you made your own rules out of it. We didn't say anything in the most recent years. The ones I can remember, and I'm sure they're being done today, I just haven't kept up, but dancing can't be done. Can't let kids dance, can't anybody dance. That's not in the Bible. And people will hold on to that. When I was at Harding, and I think it's still a big deal in some places, people who swam in a pool or the ocean or a lake, if boys and girls swam together, that was wrong. Well, I can certainly see how both of those sort of situations could be wrong, but this isn't something that we should say, well, nobody can do it because it could be wrong. There is an abuse in Corinthians of people who ate during or after their worship services. And people say, well, you can't eat at all. Well, that's not true because they continue to do it. It's that some are going away hungry and some are getting drunk, to getting too much. Everybody gets the same thing. Is what he's saying. He said everybody's gonna eat and everybody's gonna eat. So there's a lot of things. And this is where the situation and the command has to use some common sense. The command is this, what the Word of God says. But what about in this situation? Well, the old preacher who said, do you mean that you can take a woman in your arms and have no lustful thoughts? And a man answered, yes, I can do that. Said that you are three things, one of three things, more than a man, less than a man, or a willful liar. Which that is not true. That is not true. If you have a problem with that, then no, you should not dance. You go to Muslim countries today, and when strict Sharia law is enacted, one of the first things they will do is get rid of movie theaters, they will get rid of televisions, books, all kinds of things, and say, well, we are going to keep you from lusting off of the things that we can't control on the TV. We're going to keep you from lusting over books that we can't control, so we will get rid of them. And we will get rid of this, that, and the other, and all these other things. ISIS, when they moved into a place, it's so horrible, they wound up in Iraq. Because Iraq is one of the cradles of civilization, and there are so many old things. And they just went through museums, and because these were pagan artifacts, they just destroyed them. They took to huge, big statues out in the desert and the mountains. They took their anti-aircraft guns and destroyed them. Things that were millennia old. That was our history, was the history of mankind. But it's, you look at this, we don't want this to start again. We don't look at this, we want this to start again. So they got rid of it. They destroyed it. It's the same thing that we do today when we say,
Virginia's taken down Robert E. Lee.
that's the day, yeah, I saw that in his own home state. We're destroying the history. I've never been fond of destroying the true and accurate history. I mean, why would you do that? If you don't like it, you don't like it, but you don't have a choice. It's over with. People did those things for a reason. ISIS destroyed statues of Asherah and things like that. And this was part of the history. In fact, it's biblical history as well, because these gods were there and God commanded about them, and it'd be nice to know a little bit more about them. And the more we know, the more we realize how right God was to command against them. I've never been fond, and especially as a historian of me, but also as a biblical student. Why get rid of the truth? Why get rid of the truth, the preserved truth? We need to be preserving. We need to be seeing that. It's right to get angry at it, but it's not right to say that now. We did. And, Les Robert E. Lee is kind of, I can't talk about too much because he's kind of a great deal of one. I didn't really think about much about him one way or the other. But when I was in Southern, getting my master's, I had to take a class in the history of the South. Well, I was a master's student, I was a grad student in a room full of undergrads. There were 5 of us, and about 100 people in the class. So we had to take a different class. Our paper that we had to do had to be much better. And so I wanted to do a report. I wanted to do my research project on Alexander Stephens from Georgia, Vice President of the Confederacy. And he said, sure, Joe, that's a great idea. However, what I would like to see is research done on Stevens after the war. Okay, fine. So I had this big paper on Stevens after the war, and it turns out who he was. He was in Crawfordsville, Georgia. He was a cripple, an invalid about all of his life. But he was a representative, and then the Civil War happened, and he was part of the Confederate Congress as well. He was vice president of the Confederacy, and he was also a member of the House of Representatives after the Civil War, and he died while he was governor of Georgia. He died because of Savannah, actually. On New Year's Day, he was taking a carriage ride through Savannah back to his train, and there was a window broken. It was cold, and it caught pneumonia. And when he got back to Atlanta, he died. Anyway, I saw through that a lot of these old Confederates. Now, Nathan Bedford Forrest, he was the guy that was awful, but Robert E. Lee refused to have anything to do with politics. He refused to run for president. In fact, he even said we need to preserve the Union. And he became president of Washington University in Virginia. Mother got me a book years ago of his letters, his papers, while he was president of Washington University. It was very touching. A lot of things that he had to write. 2 young men died because they drowned in a pond while they were students there, and he had to write their parents, and that's there. This is history. It happened at that university. Now it's called Washington Lee University. Still, even today. It happened. And Robert E. Lee, in my opinion, was a subpar general. He was not the tactician everybody thought he was. He probably lost the war in the South, but he was a wonderful human being. But it's the truth. I mean, with every truth, with every part of history, there is good and bad. We don't need to get rid of either. We need to learn from the bad, and we need to imitate the good. We have to be said about everyone, and just not because it's in favor right now. But the idea that we should take these commands of the Bible, and we should take them where they don't need to go, that's not what they were supposed to do. And the reason that I'm kind of quitting on that and going on to verse 9, this is a more important thing. This kind of sets up what's fixing to happen. They went to a synagogue. So it wasn't a temple. Departing from there, he went to a synagogue. And a man was there whose hand was withered. And they questioned Jesus, asking, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" So that they might bring charges against him. But he said, "What man is there among you who has a sheep, and if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not take hold of it and lift it out?" Let's stop there for a minute. They're asking him, okay, same people, they're asking him. They get to the synagogue, there's a man whose hand was withered. I don't know what that means, but he was hurt. Something was wrong with his hand. It probably was palsy or something like that. And Jesus said, so they asked him, "Can you heal this man on the Sabbath?" Which they're asking, to me, the wrong question. The answer is not, can you heal this man on the Sabbath? But the more important question is, here is a man who is crippled. Are you able to heal this man at all? That's the question. Which just shows you how important things are, and it shows you why these Pharisees are not the witnesses they actually should be. Are the harbingers of the Messiah that they actually should be. Because they're not concerned with whether or not this man can be healed. They're concerned with what Jesus may say about it, that they can trap him or they can bring charges against him. Now, forgetting about the law of the Sanhedrin for a minute, was it lawful to do anything on the Sabbath? Could you do any kind of labor on the Sabbath? Yes, you could. Two things I know of were excused. You could perform an act of necessity on the Sabbath. In other words, something that happens that has to be done. If your house catches fire on the Sabbath, you are allowed to put it out. If your sheep falls into a pit on the Sabbath, you're allowed to go down and get it and get some help and get the sheep out. You can also perform an act of mercy. You could do anything to help someone else. If your child was sick, you could saddle up your horse or saddle up your donkey or ox or whatever it is you've got to a wagon and take your child to somebody who could heal. You could, if someone was sick, you could take them some chicken soup or something. You can do an act of mercy and an act of necessity. So he says, if you have a sheep and it falls into a pit, won't you get it out? How much more valuable is a person than a sheep? So that it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Then he said to the man, stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out and it was restored to normal, like the other. But the Pharisees went out and conspired against him as to how they might destroy him. This to me is incomprehensible. They're not concerned that Jesus could heal this man. They're concerned that Jesus could heal this man on the Sabbath day. This speaks to a lot of stuff that we see in religion today. I am in a position, kind of, because I preach here, but also I am, because of our work in missions and things like that, I am fairly, not well known, but known throughout many churches all over the U.S. and other places. So I hear a lot of, let me just ask you this. There was a preacher at a congregation who actually asked me, and I was flattered that he did, but he asked me to teach him a little bit about PowerPoint. He saw some of the things that I did with PowerPoint. I'm not saying it's great, but and honestly, I'm behind the times because people have moved on beyond PowerPoint. I just don't know anything else, so I use it. But he wanted to know a little bit about PowerPoint, but he finally did use it. However, he did not use it the way I do. He would download a sermon, and you can do this, by the way, and I'm really glad you can. He would download a sermon in PowerPoint, and then he would download the PDF, which is it's a document with the exact sermon word for word on it. The stuff that we do, or we did do about Isaiah and stuff like that, I just like that on Sunday night. Except I don't use that. Okay, I just use the, and adapt it. I use the PowerPoint, change the background a little bit, and change some of the things and emphasis, and I reworked a little bit. However, sometimes he would just do that. He would have a sermon printed out in front of him, and he would read it. And at the proper time, he and his wife had rehearsed it, and she would click the button to change the slide that people were looking at. He was criticized for that. Now, I wasn't asked. I just heard the criticism, and I wasn't asked anything, so I couldn't say anything because I really wasn't even there when it happened. But I heard about it, and I thought to myself, aren't you kind of looking at the wrong thing? Is what he said biblical? Did you learn anything? And my guess would be, for the second question, yes, but for the first, for the first question, yes, the second question, no. Because what he said was biblical, but they had no idea if they learned anything or not, because they really didn't pay any attention. There were people out in the audience who typed in a search on their phone for the title of his lesson, and it came up, and they downloaded the PDF, and they followed along, so he's just reading this, he's not doing anything. Would I do it? No. And the reason I would do it is I can't. I don't think I could. I mean, I can't sit up there and read. I would be bored. But he could, and that's the way he did it. And maybe he would have done something different in the future. I don't know. But the idea is maybe he was doing the best that he possibly could do, and he was helping them by using visual aids, and he was also helping them by giving them what the Bible said. You know, if I wanted to give my 2 cents worth of it into it, why in the world would a preacher put his PowerPoint online and also word for word what he said? Why would you do that anyway? And who would be the person who had to listen and type it all out? That's what he said. I mean, it's way too much effort for him to do. He's already provided us with a PowerPoint. Why in the world? The whole thing kind of left me cold. Because here the man was, maybe doing the best that he can, and knowing that, I think probably so. But he wasn't doing it the way they thought he should do it, but what he was doing was biblical. And every time he'd do it, they would download and watch and tell each other, trying to trap him in what he did, which is what you're doing to Jesus. Now, the repercussions, the consequences are not the same, but the idea is. Or what
They
about,
didn't like reading
it wasn't so
because it
much,
was a qualification.
well, they didn't like him reading it at all, and
But I mean, what was the point?
they thought that they were paying him, he ought to be making up his own lessons and doing his own studying and all that kind of stuff. That was what I got out of it.
And that's a rule.
Well, no, but
But they thought of it as a rule.
yeah, and same thing has been done to me. The same kind of thing has been done to me. When I was preaching, well, somewhere else, one of our elders wanted me to keep a book of what I did every day. And I thought to myself, no, I can't do that. So I said, well, if I do something that people don't want you to know about, I'll just put a time in there and I'll put an X. It's okay, that'd be fine. And I got to where, as I kept the book, there was more X's than anything else. So finally, and he made me threw that back up to me in a couple meetings later. They didn't tell me anything. I said, that's not supposed to, it's none of your business. I said, I'm not keeping the book anymore. Don't ask for it. Well, I don't know if you're gonna be able to stay here. I said, well, the people will decide. You don't have that decision. And I said, if you wanna go and tell them, tell them. Well, I don't see why you can't do it. I said, well, and I called his name. I said, because you are known as a huge big gossip, and if you know where I go and what's talked about, you will tell other people, you will hurt things.
Oh, not a book of what you were doing,
Mm-hmm. Who I was talking to.
but everything.
Mm-hmm. Who I was talking to.
I thought you meant like things you should be doing in church and stuff.
Well, it
Making
was,
notations.
well, that was what he wanted, was stuff I should be doing in the church, which in his opinion was not mine. That he thought I should be visiting in the homes of strangers and trying to talk them into coming to church. And I did that anyway, but they didn't want me to tell him, and I wasn't going to. And some of our members, he kind of let it be known that he'd given me the book to keep, and some of our members said, I want to talk to you, but I don't want my name in that book. Did you give it to him? And I said, okay, I'm not going to put it in there, but X. They didn't tell me anything. I said, it's not supposed to. And I said, if you want to bring this up, you go ahead, but you bring it up publicly and I'll look at it. But I'm not gonna keep it anymore. Well, I can't do that, so then you just leave it alone. I'm not doing it anymore. Keep your books, you know, I'm not dealing with it. But see, that's what he thought I should be doing. And a lot of times, and I didn't really like what this guy said, but now the older I get, the more I feel like he was probably right. It's not the way he said it. There was a guy that preached nearby that he said that everybody who drops a dollar in the collection plate could think they're the preacher's boss. That's the biggest problem we got. And, you know, I really have only faced that a couple of times and really have kind of put it down as soon as that happens. You know, I found some rules that I use. It kind of helps that. If somebody says, listen, Joe, I think I would like for you to preach a sermon on this. I won't say I will. I'll say, okay. But when I do, I will say, brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so asked me to preach a sermon on this. And I was, oh, you can't do that. Which means he had an ulterior motive. Okay? So, actually, I've never preached a sermon in 30 years. Or 40 years that people have said, I want you to preach a sermon on this without doing that. But oddly enough, I've only done it about 1 or 2 times. People have said it's okay, then go ahead. One was a young lady here that was studying in school, in high school, how the earth came about, the creation, and she was being taught the extra biblical ways, you know, like with eons and evolution and this kind of stuff and origin of species. And so I looked at my old notes from Christian Evidences, and on Sunday night for about a month, because it takes a while, we talked about that. And I said who told me to do it, and everybody agreed, you know, it's a good thing to do. You know, there's a lot of things in science that prove what the Bible has to say. The salinity of the ocean theory and this, that, and the other, because when you're dealing with that topic, what you're actually trying to say is that the world is really not as old as science says it is. I mean, that's the crux of the matter. It's not billions of years old, it's thousands of years old, which is a big difference. And there are many things in science and in creation that do state that very thing, that the world is only thousands of years old, not billions of years old. The one thing that science relies on, just very quickly, is carbon dating. Okay, yes, it works. Has it been proven to work? No. Because the only way you could prove it is if you created something and then watched it for over 1 billion years and see how the carbon decays, you know, or the radiation decays over the course of billions of years. Does science look good? Yeah, but it can't be proven. And what would happen if a catastrophic event happens during those billions of years that you say that what about the creation event? Would that not make a big difference in matter as we know it? And any physicist that you talk to is going to have to say, I really don't know. I said, I don't know either. So there's no point in you saying this is a fact. You know, or the flood, what's that going to do to it? You know, all of a sudden, you're looking at a rock that's been dry for thousands of years, and you're telling me that it's been dry for millions of years, or billions of years, but it's been covered in salt water and completely inundated. Does that change? Well, yeah, it does. Well, how much? Well, we don't know. Well, then you don't know. You know, so the Bible, the events of the Bible could actually have changed this carbon dating ritual. That it was, and I mean, people say, well, that's just silly. It's not, it's just silly because nobody's considering it. It's actually not silly, it's scientific. But, you know, I preached a certain series of lessons on that because, because somebody here asked me to, and I did tell them, you know, this is why I'm preaching, because so-and-so asked me to do so. Everybody really liked it. Plus, there's the two things in Job that we've looked at, that nobody knows what is, and the thing about the flood that nobody knows what is. People just are assuming, and biblical people need to quit assuming. What was Leviathan? What was in Job the behemoth? Two creatures that he talks about that everybody seems to accept were present at the time. Oh, that was just you don't know what it was. It could have been something that left bones that looked like dinosaurs. And then nobody in the book of Genesis can explain to me what this is about the flood. It says two things. One is the sons of God married the daughters of men. I don't know what that means. It also says, and the Nephilim were on the earth at that time. And that's all it says. Nephilim is simply in Hebrew means the burning ones. I have no idea what they are. Russell Crowe's movie understands that. I hated the movie, but he came up with a bizarre explanation about what the Nephilim were, that they were supposed to be fallen angels and stuff like that. But that probably isn't it. At least they took it into account, where our
But no
people
more.
don't take it into account.
Exactly, no more observed than
Mhm.
ignoring it.
You just don't. And there's a lot of these questions that we people in the Bible and students of the Bible just refuse to ask and just let science get away. Our scientists are the pursuit of what is known as science gain.
Kids have these questions a lot.
And
I
they
mean,
should.
a lot. And it's kind of hard. I went through a course that
Mhm.
had, and it's, you know, talked about possibilities of the Leviathan and the flood and, you know, things like that. But it is interesting because this is us.
Mhm. Well, it goes, I think Christians are hiding behind, and I think science is hiding behind this notion that we all tend to hide behind. And folks, we tend to hide behind it politically, sociologically, how we do things. We just assume that everything is just the same today. Is going to be always the same as it is today. Going. I mean, we just actually look at things and make plans based on that. And not only that, we just assume that everything is the same in the past. It's always been the same. You know, Rome, just a very small for instance, we look at Rome, the Roman Empire, and say, this is what happened during Rome. Well, no, it wasn't. Because the Roman Empire lasted over 400 years. Do we live today in 2021 the same way that people lived in 1621? They changed just as much over the course of all that time. But we just assume Rome is that way. Here they all are, the Colosseum and everything, and this kind of stuff. And you know, what we look at as Rome, can you imagine the Christians being taken into the Colosseum? No, you can't. Because the Colosseum was not built until over 100 years after the coming of Christ.
And this is why a lot of people say the Bible contradicts itself and things. But it doesn't really speak of the Colosseums per se. But these are issues we should be dealing with because nothing new under the sun. So, you know, in a way, everything is the same. We have the same evil deeds. And some are even worse then than they were now that we think are so horrible.
And some are worse now.
But these are things we really need to deal with because this is temptation. Temptation, period. Up, down, sideways.
It's the desire and to induce the desire in someone to do wrong.
Yes.
Now, that's taken that's taken so many forms, but it all winds up being the same thing. I mean, if, like in the Old Testament, this just occurred to me while you're talking, you just don't, and it seems to be in the King James, and like when Noah got drunk and fell asleep, uncovered his nakedness, you know? And that was it, you know, you don't look at someone when they uncover their nakedness, you know? Well, today with the internet porn, you know, that's a completely different thing to look at when you uncover someone's nakedness, you know? But it's the same exact sin, and the same exact temptation, and the same exact problem. It just happens in a different form. You know,
And
it's,
some of these things happen, if you put 50 people in there with Noah, you know, you would have some that would look away, you would have some that would glance, you would have some that look away and glance back, you have some that would want to come on and snicker, and things like that, but it's a attitude.
yeah, and it's happened in different ways, but it has its roots in the same desire, you know. You know, back in like 1800s, people would sneak around and peek through windows, you know, at women undressing. You know, but it's the same sin, it's the same temptation. And by the way, I'll mention this now, but and what we just got talking about, there, if you start looking at it and looking at the Bible that way, when the Nephilim were around, the sons of God started marrying the daughters of men, stuff like that. Something very bizarre happens in biblical history at the flood. It changes the way that mankind lives. I don't know why. I have a couple of guesses, and I don't know if they're right, but you know, where Methuselah lived 969 years. You can explain that away or say it didn't mean a real year, this, that, and the other, or whatever. Well, why in the world does the Bible say years if they mean years? Why would we have that? But Methuselah lived before the flood. And if you do the math, Methuselah died in the same year as the flood. But after the flood, people still live a long time, but not near as long. The average lifespan goes from before the flood, drops by hundreds of years after the flood, and then keeps getting lower and lower and lower and lower and lower because of the time of the kings. Something happened during the flood to this world of ours that changed the course of mankind, which is exactly what God said was going to happen with the flood. But something happened during the flood that changed everything. So to look at it and say, well, things have always been just like they are. Carbon has always radioactively decayed at a certain rate. You can't say that because something bizarre and unique happens after the flood to everything. If you'll look at it and pay attention to it as you're reading through Genesis, you'll see it.
Yeah.
Everything changes.
Flood, as we think of, is no Geechee there getting too big and
Right.
continuing on. When you had up and down flood,
Mhm.
probably.
Right. And a lot of people say it was not a worldwide flood.
It was a street, I've seen that too.
It looks like it was a worldwide flood because everybody has a history of it all over the world. You know, they may not attribute it to the same God, but they have this sort of thing in their history about the flood. And what happens to this world of ours if you completely cover it with seawater? And not really seawater that we know of, but the seawater that existed at that time. What happens when you completely cover everything with seawater for a good amount of time and then drain it? it looks like several diseases came into being after that event. Things happened differently. There were no longer the Nephilim. They were gone, whatever they were. The sons of God married the daughters of men. If you just want to say the people that follow God married pagan people, no. I mean, there really weren't anything. They were disobedient people, but they were not pagan people. So I don't know what it was. You know,
What
and-
did they produce?
yeah, and what kind of, people did they actually, were they, I don't know.
Or did they? It said married. Married implies,
Mhm.
but
And
it doesn't say that they were able to get anything, like a horse and a
right,
mule,
and what's the difference?
a donkey.
I mean, what's the difference? What are the sons of men? I mean, what are the daughters of men, and what are the sons of God? You know, I don't know. You know, what are these sons of God things talking about? So everything changed after that was. And I don't think we even know, and I don't think you can say, look at this rock. It is this many years old according to carbon dating and carbon radioactive decay. This proves the Bible does not exist. No, it doesn't. There's so many ways that doesn't prove.
Yeah.
What you're saying is that we have to have what's called an ex nihilo creation.
Well, they compare this one to this one and use this one as proof when this one has never been proven.
Yeah.
That this one was. So, you know, it's other, something other.
And
I have one really quick question.
Okay.
What's his name? The one that had the shriveled hand in the
Oh, Annas?
Annas.
Uh-huh.
Same description, he had a shriveled hand,
He had
much as, and was that it was them that came to look about
Mhm.
what was happening. And then they wanted to kill him, not just be mean to him or run him away. They wanted to kill him immediately when he healed that hand and said what he said.
Right. Well,
Was there jealousy there
Yeah.
because of deformity?
could be. We do know.
I have never seen much about his shriveled hand,
Well, there's
just that
anything-
there was a power play with.
Annas, we don't know that from the Bible,
Yeah,
but we do know it from extra biblical literature time that he
Yeah.
had withered hands, which is the same term that's used here. I said it might be palsy or something, but I only said might be, because when Annas had it, it didn't prevent him from killing the young man with his bare hands.
yeah.
I mean, the only thing you come out of that is, yes, he was somehow crippled, but he was also somehow very, very mean. In this case, this guy has a withered hand, and Jesus heals it, and he says something that actually, I think, just confuses them enough to where in the next paragraph, Jesus is going to withdraw from there, and they're not going to follow. There's going to be others later on. Oh, this happened. What's your invitation song?
62.
62. All right, in a few moments, we'll sing the first verse of 62. If anyone hearing has a need to repent, please come and together we stand and as we sing.
Have thine own way, Lord. Have thine own way. Thou art the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me after thy will, while I am waiting, yielded and still.
Almighty God, Father of all, we thank you this day. It's been a blessing. May it be with each and every one of us as we go about our lives. Help those of us who are sick, help those of us who are weak. Guide, guard, direct us, Father, and dismiss us from this place, but never from thy presence. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Super Sunday coming up. We should have meetings this Sunday. Joe and Kim will be here. I did the minutes really early last time. Before, had to go and look through the trash for them. I got them done. Let's see, anything else coming up? Be in prayer for, those Americans still in Afghanistan. And also in prayer for those who, the rain that hit us is also hitting Tennessee, there's flooding, and Louisiana. And those places around it that were hit by the hurricane. And there's another hurricane that's going to hit, it looks like Canada. And they're not built for it either, just like New York City and New Jersey was not built for it. The remnants of a hurricane which has dropped a storm. So, you know, we've got a lot of things happening. Right now, they're not very pleasant, so let's be in prayer all over our nation. And the wildfires are still getting worse. It always seems to be, so parts of our nation have way too much water, and some parts of our nation have way too little. I wish we could somehow find a way to truck it over there, you know, just suck it all up and train it over there or something, you know, with a big hose, some pump and drain.
That was
one
mine,
side.
yeah, too. Big great.
Drain one side.
Every county, get them on.
Mm-hmm. I'm kind of thinking because somebody's bound to get with your avoid. I mean, if you can feel a plane in midair going, you know, if you can feel a plane in
With the
midair,
little bitty.
that little bitty hose, surely we can get water from one end of the country to another. Even if we have to load it up on trains. You know, just dump it out on the hills out there. All right, anything else we talk about?
Have you ever seen, and I can't think of the word, but a map of age, like, you have to sort of figure it out that Methuselah died the same age. And I've seen them a little bit divided up, but from day one to, I want one. This is one of my bucket lists, is I want one. I tried to make one,
Mm-hmm.
way impossible for me,
There was a guy
way impossible for
that did
me.
it by the name of Gregor. He was a Roman Catholic monk many years ago. That's what we call it, the Gregorian calendar.
Yeah,
But he did it, and he did a good job at the age of the prophets and things like that, and the age of the patriarchs. However, it turns out it's off, because if you look at the Gregorian calendar, Herod the Great, the one that killed all the babies when Jesus was born, we have a record, because he was a king, of him dying in 4 BC. There's no way, because he was alive when Jesus was born. So, our calendar is actually off by 4, if not more, years. Because Herod was not on his deathbed when the wise men came and saw him. So, and I'm not criticizing Gregor. He did the best he could with what he had.
yeah.
But it turned out, and archaeology found later that it didn't pan out exactly. So I think it's close. What he found out was that the creation happened, he's being a little bit too precise, but in 6006 BC.
Mhm.
I think that the 6 at the end is probably a little bit of, I'm getting too into it too much, you know, but precise. I would say that probably if you added approximately 6,000 years before Christ, I think you would probably get it a little bit better. Oddly enough, about what you said though, and this was brought up to me when I was in my 20s, but when the statement was made that there was none righteous except for Noah and his sons, Methuselah was alive, as was Lamech, his dad, Noah's dad. We're both alive at the time. And if you do the math, Lamech dies a couple of years before the flood, but Methuselah dies in the same year of the flood. If I'm not mistaken, the flood happens in the first month of the year. So it's a pretty good bet that Methuselah probably died in a flood. But he is such a biblical trivia question. But the odd thing about Methuselah is he evidently was not a good man. But his father, Methuselah's dad, was one of the best men that ever lived. And that was Enoch, the man that never died. He walked with God.
Yeah.
And so, and this is just selfish of me, but I wish we knew a lot more about Joseph, but I wish we knew as much about Methuselah and Lamech and Enoch as we do about Joseph or Noah. You know, I wish I knew what their problem was.
Well, see, that was with the Russell Crowe movie. Those are the things I really liked it because he was there. He was the Nephilim, you know, had oddity, but some validity.
Mhm.
And there's some of the things when they left and went out to the different sons went and founded different peoples, you know, they really did hit on that really good.
Mhm.
And so I liked it for that. Other people hated it because of other things that were in
I didn't like,
the Nephilim going up, people didn't
I
like.
like the fact they took into account these things that we don't know.
Yeah.
I don't like entirely everything they did about him.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
And see, I sort of overlooked the tar stuff and him coming in the,
but what we
in
don't,
the,
but
little
what we don't
door.
see is we don't even try to take them into account.
but if you ever find me and tell me that this thing exists, I'll tape it around my room.
I don't think that it
I
does.
love it so much.
I do not think that it actually does. I don't think you can get that precise because men have tried.
Everything else is messed up.
Well, you know, and they find things,
I know,
so
you don't know what the bleed has to try.
I'm thinking that may be something I'll get,
Gotta believe.
you know.